If you agree that real heroes never stop serving, even after they hang up their uniforms and come home to the quiet streets of small towns, make sure to like and subscribe, because this story is about how courage, discipline, and leadership don't vanish when the war ends. They simply transform, and sometimes they reveal themselves in the most ordinary places, like a dusty baseball field at the edge of town, where the air smells of cut grass and concession stand popcorn, where parents lean against chain-link fences sipping from foam cups, and where children in oversized jerseys chase the kind of dreams that feel bigger than the whole world. On that field, late on a summer afternoon when the sun bent low and cast everything in the golden hue of nostalgia, she stood, not in fatigues or combat boots, not with a rifle slung across her chest, but with a whistle around her neck and dirt smudges on her knees, crouched beside a boy no older than 8, whose batting helmet kept slipping too far over his eyes. Her name was Emily, though the kids called her Coach, and the parents simply knew her as that young woman who took Little League far too seriously. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that once, not too many years ago, men twice her size had looked to her in the dead of night, radio static in their ears, hearts pounding in their throats, waiting for her voice to cut through the noise and say, "Crimson Wolf, lead the charge." That was her call sign, earned in fire and blood, a name that had followed her through convoy routes, dusty villages, and ambushes that left scars invisible to the naked eye. But here, she wasn't Crimson Wolf. She was just Emily, 28 years old, back home 2 years after an honorable discharge, carrying the weight of a career's worth of experience compressed into 8 intense years. She had enlisted at 18, fresh out of high school with nothing more than a stubborn streak and the determination to prove that she could endure what others said she couldn't. The Army became her crucible, and by 20 she was a combat medic, running missions with a mechanized infantry unit, tending to wounds under fire with the kind of steady hands that seemed impossible for someone so young. 2 deployments later, countless lives saved, a reputation forged not by rank but by resolve, she came home at 26, decorated but restless, unable to translate who she had been into who she was supposed to become. The battlefield had defined her, but civilian life asked her to redefine herself. She chose to stay close to service in her own way, working as a physical therapy assistant at a rehab clinic by day, and volunteering as a youth baseball coach by evening. Because if there was one thing she understood, it was that the next generation needed someone who believed in them, someone who could teach them to push through doubt, to rise when they stumbled, to swing even when the odds seemed against them. That evening at practice, the air carried the thick sweetness of summer, and the kids fidgeted in line at the plate, shifting from foot to foot, tapping their bats nervously. Parents clustered in lawn chairs, chatting idly, a few sneaking glances at Emily with faint amusement. To them, she was overdoing it, her way of correcting posture, her insistence on focus, her steady patience with the shy ones who lagged behind. More than one parent had whispered about how she treated the kids like soldiers, not ball players. "It's just Little League," one mother muttered, folding her arms across her chest, watching Emily crouch beside Chris, the smallest boy on the team, whose helmet wobbled on his head like a fishbowl. Chris had been struggling all season, swinging late, missing the ball, dropping his bat in frustration. His confidence was dwindling, his shoulders sagging lower each practice. But Emily saw something the others didn't. The set of his jaw, the way he clenched his hands tighter each time, not in surrender, but in a quiet refusal to quit. She lowered herself until she was eye level with him, dust rising from the dirt as she balanced on her heels. "Breathe," she told him softly. "Forget the noise. Just you and the ball. Hands here, no, overlap them. That's it. Chin up. Eyes forward. Don't chase it. Wait for it." Her voice was calm but commanding, not condescending, not pitying, just steady. The same tone she had once used in a firefight to keep someone conscious, to keep someone alive. The boy nodded, trembling with the weight of his own nerves, and when the pitch came, a soft lob meant for practice, he swung, and for the first time all season, the crack of the bat rang out like a gunshot of triumph, sending the ball arcing higher and farther than anyone expected. The bench exploded with cheers, kids jumping up and down, parents clapping reluctantly, and Chris's face lit up with the kind of joy that sears itself into memory. But not everyone was impressed. One of the mothers muttered again, shaking her head. She takes this way too seriously. They're just kids. Emily heard it, though she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago how to tune out the voices of doubt, how to trust her own instincts, how to invest in those who needed it most. To Chris, she wasn't too serious. To him, she was the first adult who believed he could. She dusted her hands, smiled faintly, and waved the next kid forward. The rhythm of practice resumed, kids swinging, balls flying, dust swirling in the warm evening light. It was an ordinary night in every sense, but there was something unspoken in the way Emily carried herself, something that didn't belong in the quiet suburbs, but it followed her home from deserts and foreign streets. A readiness, a discipline, a calm born from chaos. If you looked closely, you'd see it in the way her eyes scanned the field, always aware, always prepared, as though part of her was waiting for the call that never really goes away. The parents didn't see it. They saw only a young woman too serious for baseball. The kids didn't fully understand it, though they felt it in how she believed in them, how she made them want to try harder, run faster, swing with conviction. But beneath the surface, woven into her every motion, was the history of Crimson Wolf, the call sign whispered in radios during the worst nights, the name that meant someone was stepping forward when others froze. And though no one in those bleachers could have guessed, that name would rise again before the evening was through, not as a relic of the past, but as the spark of the present, because fate has a way of testing those who once lived on the edge. For now, though, the world was quiet, the kids laughing, the sun lowering, the breeze carrying the smell of dirt and grass. Emily crouched once more in the dust, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes, adjusting another stance, pouring her unspoken past into small, ordinary moments of guidance. And that's where our story begins. Not in the roar of combat, not in the sound of helicopters or the heat of battle, but in the simplicity of a baseball field, a coach's steady hand, a child's newfound courage, and the silence before everything changes. The evening should have ended quietly, with parents packing up folding chairs and kids chasing each other to the parking lot, their laughter trailing into the humid dusk. But life has a way of testing those who have been tested before, and just as the last round of batting practice wrapped up, a noise split the calm. A screech of tires on asphalt, too close, too fast, followed by the sickening crunch of metal against metal, the sound echoing across the open field like a cannon blast, sending every head snapping toward the road that ran alongside the park, and in an instant, the easy chatter dissolved into chaos. Parents dropped drinks, kids froze mid-step, some screamed, some cried, and for a long second no one moved at all, because shock is a strange thing. It makes the world both too fast and too slow, locking people in place between instinct and fear. But not her. For Emily, that sound didn't belong to suburbia. It belonged to another life, one where explosions and gunfire could erupt without warning, one where hesitation cost lives. Her body reacted before thought could intervene, her legs carrying her across the diamond, across the grass, toward the street, her voice cutting through the stunned silence with the same authority it once carried over the crackle of radios. Call EMS now. Keep the kids back. Eyes on me. Parents, stay with them. She barked, her tone leaving no room for debate. And for a heartbeat the onlookers simply stared, startled not just by the accident, but by the sudden transformation of their coach into something else entirely. But she didn't pause for their comprehension. She was already at the edge of the road, already taking in the scene. A small sedan crumpled against a streetlight, smoke curling from under the hood, the faint glow of fire catching where gas had spilled, and inside, the silhouettes of two children in the back seat, one crying, one frighteningly still, while a woman in the driver's seat pounded weakly at the steering wheel, dazed from the impact. The smell of burning rubber clouded the air, and people behind her shouted, but their voices blurred together, irrelevant noise compared to the sharp focus narrowing in her mind. She had felt this before, that tunnel vision, the narrowing of everything except what mattered most, and she fell into it like a second skin, like no time had passed since she'd worn the name Crimson Wolf. She ran straight to the driver's side, yanking on the door handle, cursing when it jammed from the impact. Her eyes scanned for leverage, spotted the rear door, and with the kind of brute determination born of adrenaline and necessity, she wrenched it open, ignoring the heat, ignoring the acrid smoke, pulling the crying child free first, cradling the boy against her chest before thrusting him into the arms of a bystander who had finally rushed forward. "Hold him tight. Keep him calm," she ordered, and then she ducked back in, crawling halfway across the back seat toward the still child, a little girl no older than 6 whose head lolled unnaturally, her lips tinged blue. For a second, panic threatened to pierce her composure, but training roared louder. She checked for breathing, weak but present, and carefully maneuvered her out, supporting her neck the way she'd done countless times on the battlefield with injured soldiers. Behind her, voices clamored. Parents, strangers, fear. But when she emerged holding the limp girl, silence swept across the crowd, broken only by the crackle of fire intensifying under the hood. She laid the child gently on the grass, tilting her head, checking her airway, listening, feeling, her hands moving with calm precision while her voice carried commands. "You, fire extinguisher, car shop across the street now. You, wet cloths, anything, bring them here. Everyone else, back up, give me space." The authority in her tone stripped away doubt, and suddenly people moved, running to fetch what she demanded, following her not because they understood who she was, but because something in her voice told them she had faced this before and walked out alive. The mother's screams reached her ears then, and she turned back toward the car to see the driver struggling against her seatbelt, blood streaking her forehead, panic clawing her face as the fire flared brighter. Emily sprinted back, yanked open what remained of the front door, sliced the belt free with the small utility knife she carried habitually, an old habit from deployment that never left her, and dragged the woman out just as flames licked across the dashboard. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the car's windows cracked under the heat, but Emily didn't flinch. She guided the woman to the grass, checked her pulse, pressed her hand against the bleeding cut, then turned back to the children. The boy sobbed, clutching a stranger's leg, but breathing steady. The girl, though, teetered between life and something worse, her chest rising shallow, her eyes rolling back. Emily fell to her knees beside her, blocking out the noise, the smell, the danger. Her hands pressed against the tiny chest, rhythmically, firmly, her voice calm but urgent. "Come on, sweetheart. Stay with me. Breathe." The world collapsed to that moment, just as it had in the desert when she worked under fire, when men screamed and mortars shook the ground. She counted compressions, breathed air into tiny lungs, counted again, repeating, refusing to let go, refusing to let this child slip away. And then, suddenly, a cough, weak at first, then stronger, the girl's chest heaving as she gasped for breath, her eyes fluttering open to the sight of Emily's dirt-streaked face above her. Relief hit Emily like a wave, though her composure never cracked. She shifted the girl gently, cradling her, whispering reassurance as sirens wailed in the distance. The crowd behind her erupted in shouts, half relief, half disbelief, and someone murmured, "Who is she?" But those words barely registered. For Emily, there was only the sound of that child breathing, the feel of life restored. She lifted her head as the fire engine screeched to a halt, firefighters rushing forward, medics spilling out, and without thinking, she stood, handed off the girl carefully, and barked the words that had once led squads through chaos. "Crimson Wolf, lead the charge." The phrase burst out of her like instinct, a ghost of the soldier she had been, and those close enough to hear it froze, sensing they had just glimpsed something far bigger than a coach saving kids at practice. As paramedics swept the children and their mother into ambulances, as firefighters doused the flames, as orders slowly replaced panic, the parents and players of that little baseball team stared at the woman they thought they knew, their coach Emily, now revealed in fragments of firelight and authority as someone far more. She stood apart, dirt smeared across her arms, sweat streaking down her brow, the whistle around her neck glinting against the fading sun, and for a heartbeat no one spoke, because they realized they were looking at a veteran still carrying the battlefield inside her, someone who had not stopped serving, not even when no one expected it. And as the ambulances pulled away, Chris, the boy who had finally hit his ball, approached shyly, tugged her sleeve, and whispered with a grin that spread slowly through the other kids, "Coach Wolf." When the dust settled and the sirens faded, When the glow of flashing lights disappeared down the road and the chatter of emergency crews gave way to the soft hum of crickets, the baseball field lay in an uneasy silence. Parents clutching their children tighter, kids still wide-eyed, unsure whether they had just witnessed a nightmare or a miracle. And at the center of it all stood Emily, her chest still heaving from exertion, her hands stained with dirt and faint traces of blood, her whistle swaying slightly against her shirt as though mocking the absurdity of her disguise as a coach. Because in that moment, nobody saw just Coach Emily anymore. They saw something larger, a glimpse of the soldier hidden in plain sight. And while the parents exchanged stunned looks, unsure how to approach her, the children had no such hesitation, because kids see truth without filters. And it was Chris, small and still shaking, who tugged at her arm first and said it aloud with a smile that dared others to join him, Coach Wolf. And soon it spread like wildfire across the team, the nickname turning into a chant, their voices rising not in fear, but in admiration, a chorus that pierced through the awkward tension of the adults and wrapped Emily in something she hadn't felt in years. Not duty, not command, but belonging. She crouched down, forcing her tired muscles to obey, and gathered the kids around her, assuring them everything would be okay, that the people in the ambulances were safe now, that sometimes scary things happen, but what matters is that we don't give up, that we help each other, that we stay brave even when it's hard. And though her words were simple, they carried the weight of experience, the weight of someone who had lived the worst and come back standing, and the kids listened with rapt attention, nodding, their fear dissolving in a pride as if they knew, even if they didn't understand, that they had just witnessed their coach transform into a hero before their very eyes. Behind them, parents finally began to move closer, some offering shaky thanks, others with tears in their eyes, and one mother, the same one who had whispered all season that Emily took the game too seriously, stepped forward with trembling hands, unable to meet Emily's gaze at first, and said, "I didn't know." To which Emily simply shook her head, brushing the dirt from her palms, and replied, "You weren't supposed to." Because she hadn't come home to wear her past like a medal. She hadn't chosen this small-town life to relive old glories. She had chosen it to start fresh, to serve in quiet ways, to teach children how to find their courage in small battles, not to reveal the soldier who still lived inside her. But fate doesn't care for anonymity, and sometimes the battlefield finds you again, even on a baseball diamond. As days turned into weeks, the story of that night rippled through the town, whispered first by those who were there, then shared more widely as the rescued family returned home from the hospital with tearful gratitude, their words painting Emily not just as a coach, but as the reason they were alive. And though she never sought recognition, the whispers grew into something undeniable. People began stopping her at the grocery store, at the gas station, at the rehab clinic where she worked, saying thank you with awkward smiles or grasped hands, their voices tinged with reverence. And though she deflected with humility, the truth was that something had shifted, not just in how they saw her, but in how she allowed herself to be seen. At practice, the kids refused to call her anything but Coach Wolf, their chant echoing off the fences with playful pride. And though she laughed and tried to steer them back to focus, she couldn't quite hide the warmth that sparked in her chest, because for years, Crimson Wolf had been a name tied to war, to blood, to the burden of leadership and chaos. But now it was being reborn in laughter and joy, in the playful grit of children learning to swing bats and chase grounders. And that was healing in its own way. She began to realize that maybe her call sign didn't have to stay buried in a shadow box or tucked away in memories she tried not to relive. Maybe it could evolve. Maybe it could mean something new, something better, not the charge into gunfire, but the charge into life, into mentorship, into being the steady presence these kids needed. Still, there were moments that tested her resolve, quiet nights when she sat alone on her porch, the sound of the crash replaying in her head, the smell of smoke lingering in her nose, the weight of that little girl's still body in her arms haunting her until the memory of her cough, her gasp for breath, brought relief like a second sunrise. She reminded herself that saving them wasn't luck, it was training, instinct, the same tool she once used to keep her brothers and sisters in uniform alive. And for the first time since her discharge, she allowed herself to feel pride without guilt. To acknowledge that her years of service didn't have to be a closed chapter, but could be the foundation of who she was becoming. The parents noticed the difference too. Less suspicion, more respect. The same mother who once criticized her intensity now thanked her for pushing her son to try harder, admitted that perhaps seriousness wasn't such a bad thing when it came wrapped in care. The town invited her to a small ceremony, where the mayor handed her a certificate of recognition she didn't want but accepted with grace, her eyes flicking to the kids in the front row, fidgeting in their jerseys, grinning wide, as if the whole thing was their idea. The season rolled on, the kids improving, their confidence growing, their bond with her deepening. And each time she crouched in the dirt to adjust a stance or whispered encouragement before a pitch, she knew she was doing exactly what she was meant to do, not erasing her past, but channeling it, reshaping it into something brighter. And though she never spoke of the phrase that slipped from her lips that night, Crimson Wolf, lead the charge, the kids kept it alive in their own way, using it as a chant before games, not fully knowing where it came from, but sensing its power, its history, its connection to their coach's strength. And Emily led them, smiling at the irony that what was once a call to battle had become a call to joy, to teamwork, to the simple courage of stepping up to the plate. So when you hear this story, remember that heroes don't vanish when the war ends, and call signs don't have to fade into silence. Sometimes they echo, transformed, in the laughter of children, in the dirt of a baseball field, in the whispered nickname of a coach who was once a soldier, still leading charges, just in a different kind of war. And maybe that's the lesson. We don't stop being who we were. We simply learn new ways to carry it forward. For Emily, Crimson Wolf was never just a name from the battlefield. It was the truth of who she was, a leader, a protector, a steady hand in the storm. And on that little league field, under the glow of stadium lights, surrounded by kids who believed in her more than she believed in herself, Crimson Wolf was reborn. Not in fire, but in the unshakable spirit of a community that finally saw her for who she truly was.